So with yesterday's episode of Piracy Show, by the way, we kind of dealt with the idea that, of course, CIG is going to claw all this money that we're earning back. I mean, it's inevitable. I admire the goal that CIG is going for, and it's something that I have advocated for in the past. It's some feeling of progression, but I've advocated for it through, different things that you can kind of pull off in the game. Certainly, if you remember, getting the glaive or getting the pirate caterpillar, if you've done that, you have to do certain things in the game, and that gives you a badge that allows you to buy a certain ship. Now, I don't feel that we should have certain checkpoints in the game that allow us the privilege to buy a certain ship. Rather, I think that we should be at a point where, maybe there are things that we do in game that give us certain rewards. Like, as a subscriber, I frequently get different sets of armor or occasionally weapons. I think one of the big ones in 3.10 is I'm going to get the lightning pistol. And I feel that there are certain checkpoints that you should be able to hit in game, like if you do a bunker mission, or if you do, liberating Korea from the invaders mission or something like that, that there should be a weapon set aside somewhere that once you get it, that becomes permanently attached to your account, like one of those beat up automatic rifles that sometimes you see pirates using. Not the AR, but the other one, the energy weapon. There's a rifle that they have. I forget the name of it, but it has this really kind of beat up and weathered look. And I feel that things like that you can kind of carry forward. That type of progression, I would be all in favor of, and I would be a huge advocate of. But I mean, it is what it is. Now, certainly we've looked at a lot of things in 3.10, some good, some bad, some changes that we're not exactly sure if they're really going to be good. Changes to the smuggling mission, though ultimately CIG did say that they are looking at that, though I think it's too soon, given that they only really said that on Friday. Too soon to see a manifest change to that. It's probably something that they're aware of, so maybe something that we'll see in the next 2 weeks, or I would be surprised if we didn't see it in time for the 3.10 release. But is there anything in 3.10 that I'm really kind of looking forward to? And this is me playing in 3.9 with a friend right now. And one of the things that we're kind of messing around with is the idea of, having the pilot and also a gunner in the top turret of the Cutlass. And we're just playing around with that. And there are turret improvements in 3.10, and so far they've been pretty good. Overall, I think they're heading in a good direction with turrets and making turrets much more enjoyable to play than they have been in the past. I mean, I feel that, when you kind of take a moment to kind of look at that kind of team play environment, I mean, yeah, this, what CIG could have done? They could have instead enabled NPCs and turrets. That's something that we know already works in the game and has worked for a long time. We just don't have the UI to enable that as players, and it's something that we're going to have in the future. But kind of taking the time to look at a team play element like that and then say, we can make some improvements here. Why don't we? That's something that I approve of, even ahead of putting NPCs in those turrets, which, I mean, truthfully may have been an easier thing to do for them. I think that doing it this way, where it benefits teamwork and, that type of gameplay, I think was, in a weird way, it wasn't taking the easy road, it was taking the high road. And I think that that's something that deserves a bit of applause. That's something that, someone looked at this and said, we could probably just implement NPC turret gunners, or maybe even server blades or something like that, though I mean that would be contingent on other systems coming in the game. But certainly they could have just said, we can just flick a switch and give you access to, with a basic UI, to NPC turret gunners. But instead, they focused on the team play element, which is a great thing. And that's something that definitely in 3.10 I'm looking forward to. Often in a lot of MMOs, in order to kind of create what some developers feel is a player-friendly environment, they do something to their communities that that is really, I mean, it's something that upfront feels like, oh, okay, you know, we're making things a little bit easier, we're making it easier to adopt the game, but it has a really detrimental effect on the game in the long term. And I think that if you look at many MMOs that are out there today, they're to a certain degree certainly guilty of this. I mean, there are exceptions, but a lot of MMOs, as you kind of progress through the game, they've made your characters into almost entirely self-contained units. You can do everything by yourself. You don't need anyone else. And that it benefits the initial experience. And that has to be said. It does benefit the initial experience, but what you all too often end up with is players who kind of come out of that leveling pipeline and they're unaware, unsure, or unprepared to interact with other players to accomplish much more difficult goals. And if you play a lot of different MMOs, you certainly see that with players who have just freshly leveled up. They're completely unprepared to interact with other players, and at times often afraid or scared to interact with other players. They may have had one or two experiences along the way that kind of left a bad taste in their mouth, and so now they're kind of, you know, they're almost afraid or, you know, petrified of the idea of interacting with other players. And this is certainly something that, you know, it benefits that initial experience and it makes it a little bit easier to kind of get through the game. But long term, I think that it damages players in doing that. I think that the better way to kind of go about things, and certainly, you know, how this turret improvement appears to me, is that CIG kind of said, you know what, we're not going to make the individual player experience easier, but we're going to make the group experience even easier and far more welcoming. And, you know, going and taking on the turret issue was definitely a step in that direction. You know, the changes that they made individually aren't going to impact us, but as a shared experience, they are definitely something that is going to, you know, that we're going to drive or derive a lot more benefit from over the long term, you know, kind of reinforcing the idea of team gameplay, which is, you know, is a great thing, you know. Now, I don't feel that, you know, they should, you know, scrap the idea of NPC turrets or blade controlled, you know, server blade controlled turrets entirely. And I think that that option should always be there, because let's face it, you know, if you're like me and sometimes you get these bouts of insomnia, or all of a sudden you wake up and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and you're just not going back to sleep, it's really hard to kind of find someone who works on that same schedule. And so you know, you want to get out there with one of your bigger ships and you just want to have some turret gunners, but there's no one else online and you don't want to spend, you know, the next 20-30 minutes interviewing potential candidates, and you just kind of want to get moving. You should have a system in the game that enables that. But at the same time, I feel that stepping forward first with improvements to joining other players was a step in the right direction. I do want to see NPC gunners at some point, but, you know, taking the time to put the work into the team play rather than strictly maybe just even saying like, okay, you just flip a switch and you have a server blade from now on, but in the future we're going to make it a much more complicated mechanic. I think doing that may have had a broader, easier appeal for a lot of players, but I don't think that it necessarily would have benefited them over the long term. It's a tough balance to maintain, you know, in a game, because you want to be able to enable players who are either forced to play solo or simply don't have that option in that moment. You want to have them enabled, and you don't want to feel, you know, you don't want them to feel hobbled by the fact that they don't have anyone to play with in that moment. But at the same time, you should create systems in such a way, or you should order, you know, your improvements to systems in such a way that when you're looking at things like this, you do look at the team play element and you try to reinforce that and you try to build that structure. some people, because of negative experiences, they tend to kind of be reticent. They tend to kind of draw back from interacting with other players because, I had this one profoundly negative experience, and that has kind of tainted, my, that tainted my gameplay, or that made me feel a certain way and I didn't enjoy it. But the truth of it is that if you give it time and you meet the right people, you can enable so many more things through those people. I mean, oftentimes, when I'm working on videos for this YouTube channel and I'm throwing ideas out there, I'm not throwing them out there and I was like, this is the way it is and this is what you should do. I'm asking questions, or I'm presenting ideas, and I'm looking for in the comments, which apparently, you're not supposed to do, but I guess in a weird way I'm kind of subverting YouTube and using it to my own ends. Is like, I'm putting it out there to see, okay, what's the feedback? Where have I made my mistakes? What am I not seeing? If someone says, oh my God, Minion, you didn't know that they changed the quantum drive so that now they travel at different speeds and things like that. My reaction to that isn't like, oh no, I made a mistake on YouTube. My reaction to that was literally going on Hardpoint going, okay, how can I make a Herald that has very long range but extremely low sig, because this, that's kind of like a project for a video that I want to do in the future once we get improvements to hacking, or possibly get range hacking, kind of implemented in the game, if that indeed becomes a thing through either one of the missiles that you were supposed to fire at a ship that allows us to connect to it, or some other mechanic. That was immediately what I looked for. I don't look at the feedback as a negative thing. I look at it as like, oh, okay, good. Here are the things that I'm not thinking of. My YouTube channel doesn't exist as a way to flog my referral code, or as a way to, sell a fashionable Minion Soldier fanny pack. It's here to basically throw ideas out there and to get as many eyes on them as possible, so I can find all the holes in my thinking and go like, okay, here's something I never thought of. Here's something I didn't see. And to, in exchange, sometimes spread ideas out there that maybe other people didn't think of, or different perspectives. And I think that is, doing YouTube for most people the wrong way, but doing it for me the right way, That's kind of how I look at these things. And I find that if you isolate yourself from other players just because of negative experiences in the past, you rob yourself of the opportunity to learn what those other players have. I'm very suspicious of people who just think that they have the right answer to everything in every game that they've ever played. And I'm equally suspicious of game developers who are like, this is the way it is and we're not changing it. I mean, oftentimes, you can look at Blizzard right now. Oftentimes they forget that their fan base has far more brain power than they do. And I'm not saying that in an insulting way, but their fan base has far more brain power than they will ever be able to accumulate in their company. And oftentimes the answers to a lot of their problems originate from that fan base, So that's kind of how I look at these ideas. I'm of all the features that are coming in 3.10 that I could be excited for, turret improvements I think are the biggest one. Turret improvements I think are the thing that I am the most excited for, because this kind of reinforces the idea of going out there as a team and having fun together and giving players more reasons to come into collision, not just, for PvP, but in a positive way, and for ideas to spread amongst those players, which is always a good thing. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.